This morning, the state called its first witness to the stand, a deputy who reported to the crime scene that day in 2021. They played parts of his body cam video along with his testimony. It comes after both sides presented their opening arguments detailing the gruesome state of the bodies after they were shot. Murdaugh has maintained his innocence through it all and pleaded not guilty to all charges. NBC News correspondent Catie Beck has been following this case for us from the very start, and she joins us from outside this courthouse that's in Walterboro, South Carolina. Catie, thanks so much for being with us. So many startling details. I know this town has just sort of turned into being all about this right now. We understand crowds, people traveling there. First, tell us, I know that prosecutors are leaning big into cell phone evidence specifically. They say it shows Murdaugh was at the scene of the crime just minutes before the murders. Tell us what evidence they presented so far.
Yeah, that was certainly a highlight for prosecutors yesterday. What many legal experts have said is that the evidence in this case is largely circumstantial. But if prosecutors can convince the jury of this cell phone video, that actually on this video is Alex Murdaugh at the crime scene minutes before the crime occurs, it is going to put a pretty big hole in his alibi, his story, that he was never inside that kennel until he discovered the bodies. They say in this video, you can actually hear the voice of Alex Murdaugh in the background. You don't physically see him on the video, but carefully worded by the prosecutor, they say they have witnesses to identify his voice as being in that kennel moments before the time of death. That stands completely contradictory to what Murdaugh has said in terms of where he was. He said he was actually taking a nap up at the main house and then went to check on his mother, that he was never in the kennel during that period of time. So this cell phone video will be critical to the prosecution's case. It's very clear from the opening statements that they intend to lean on it. Here's what they had to say during their opening statements yesterday.
The evidence is going to be such that you're going to reach the inescapable conclusion that Alex murdered Maggie and Paul, that he was the storm, that the storm was coming for them. And the storm arrived on June 7th, 2021, just like the storms that are heading here right now.
So again, a lot of focus on that video. Will the jury believe it? Will they believe that it is actually Alex Murdaugh's voice in the background? We suspect that the defense is going to try and prove otherwise. It is going to be sort of a gray area, being that you can't physically see him on camera. It is just the sound of his voice, so they say.
Quickly, Catie, while we have you, Murdaugh's attorney said the police decided that night that he was guilty. They never searched for other suspects. Walk us through the details the defense is now putting forth.
Yeah, the defense mentioned yesterday, which is accurate, that just, hours after this crime had come to light, that basically SLED, the state investigative agency, had put out a statement to the public saying no one should be fearing for their safety. They did not feel that, a murderer was on the loose and that anyone's safety was in jeopardy. The defense attorneys say, why were they rushing to that conclusion if they didn't have a suspect, if they hadn't done very much investigating? It's very clear that they were pinpointing Alex Murdaugh as a suspect, and they even mentioned in the openings that they've been ignoring witness testimony as well. So we're going to hear those details, I'm sure, come to light when the defense has their turn.
All right, NBC News correspondent Catie Beck. Thank you, Catie. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos now. Danny, speaking of defense, this is what you do. You're an active defense lawyer. So we know that in addition to these two murder charges, Alex Murdaugh is facing more than 100 separate financial crimes charges as well. And the prosecution is going to argue that's why he wanted to kill his wife and son. Do you think that's going to stand up before a jury, or are they going to be looking for some more physical evidence? And that cell phone video that Catie was talking about, walk us through that.
I think you've honed in on a very important point. I think initially that may be a hard sell to jurors. The theory that, oh, my financial house of cards, my life is imploding, everything's falling in, I'll get the attention off me and get sympathy by shooting my wife and son. I think initially the jury may have a hard time believing that. Maybe by the end, once they hear all the other shenanigans that this defendant was up to, maybe then they will believe it. Now, as for the defense, I said on this very program that you would hear in the opening from the defense a version of this theory. From day one, members of the jury, the law enforcement had tunnel vision.
Right.
They honed in on this defendant, and by doing that, they never looked for the real doer, the real killer of his wife and son. And that person is still out there. And of course, you heard a version of that.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me a mind reader. It just means that they have a limited number of defenses here. There's strong circumstantial evidence, and this cell phone video is going to be really problematic for the defense. And when you have a really bad case, you retreat to some old principles, one of which is, hey, prosecutors decided early on, my guy was the guy. There may be other people out there. But when you do that, you better come up with an alternate theory.
Got it.
Danny, something that's piqued a lot of people's interest. Murdaugh's surviving son, his name is Buster, he's been in the courtroom, it seems, supporting his dad. Other than just what that looks like, walk us through what that actually means. That signaling, does that help in any way? Kind of a show of support, that type of thing? Just what does that look like? I mean, I think a lot of this sounds almost, like it's a Dateline written already. What does this mean when there's a family member with charges like this?
It helps. Sadly, it's usually the prosecution that has all kinds of people on their side, whether it's people in the office just coming to take a look or a bunch of agents in a show of force. Yes, it's helpful, but you have to be careful as a defense attorney. You want family members in there supporting your client, but at the same time, once they're in that gallery watching the case, they are no longer eligible to be witnesses. So you need to be really careful because you have to essentially sequester witnesses so they're not tainted by testimony.
I thought Buster was supposed to testify in defense of his dad.
That can be, I mean, he may not be allowed to testify if he's sitting in the courtroom. I don't know if that particular courthouse has different rules, but generally speaking, you put someone in the gallery, they cannot testify.
They're out. Okay.
Interesting.
Legal analyst Danny Cevallos, always with a great take. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.